Here's the key thing you've got to be able to do. You've got to be able to identify what your goal is when you do a presentation. You've got to have a goal. What do you want the audience to do? Your goal is never what you want to do, is what do you want the audience to do? Do you want them to know something, to do something, to feel something? Those are the three things. You can have an audience that needs to understand some concept, or understand about your sales, or understand something in that way. That's a great goal if you want them to learn something. If you want them to do something, if they've got to start doing something differently. So basically you're saying, I need you to go out and start doing this differently. That's a goal. If you need them to feel differently, engagement in business, that's an important thing. How do we emotionally connect? If you want them to feel better about the company, if you want them to feel better about a charity, if you're doing a charity appeal, that's appealing to the emotional goal of your audience. And that's your goal. And you got to set that early on in the presentation. So to meet that goal of having an audience do something, you've got to build a business case for it. Just like with everything else, you don't just get up and talk. If you get up and talk, you go off course. You've seen people that just get up and talk randomly? Yeah, and what do you get out of that? You get this. Okay, what time is it? How long have we been here? What are we going to do? Where are we going with that? And that's the whole purpose of building a business case. Now, when you look at building a business case, you got three goals that we need to have, okay? Make it easy to understand. Make it easy to remember and as simple as possible. Okay? What's the mistake most people make at this point in their presentation? What is their business case? What do they put into it? 274 steps, 374 slides, 37 things you have to remember to compare back and forth, and that's the opposite of a great presentation. The best presentations you'll ever see are like a Steve Jobs presentation. When he's talking about the new iPad, the new iMac, the whatever Apple was introducing. Simple. He broke it down into here's what you get, here's what it looks like, here's what it'll do for you. And that was the key to what made that effective. So we're going to talk about for you how to build that business case. So let's work off the goal we said earlier. If your goal is for your audience to know something, you're going to present information to them. Your business case is built around, I'm going to share information with you. And you've got several different ways we want you to be able to share that. You can do it logically, you can do it chronologically, you can do it as a chain of events, or you can do it as a simplified presentation. Those are the four things we're going to look at in a second. The other thing you can do, if your goal was for them to do or to feel differently, then you're talking about motivation. You're motivating them to do something, to feel in a certain way. And three ways you can look at this, these are fun. Worst case, best case, and personal power. Okay? They're valid ways to convince people, to motivate people to do something different. Now we're going to walk through each of those because these are options you've got to look at for the presentation that you're going to do later on today. And for your goal, you've got to pick a method that gets you to that point. The goal is not to find the best one, it's find one that works for your audience and for the goal you have. So we're going to start with information. It's the simplest. It's what 90% of presentations done in any company around the world are. I just need to share information with you. Here's our sales for the month. Here's last month's sales. Here's a new product we're going to roll out. The audience doesn't need to do anything. They just need to understand. So it's a very valid goal, and it's important for us in the business. So let's start with the first one, which is logical. Having a logical presentation means what? What is logic?
One after another.
It's right. It's you connect the dots for people. Logic just says, is the best way to do my presentation to connect the dots for people? Now here's the fun thing I'm going to ask you to do that most people won't ask you to do. If you look in your book, logical, present the conclusion first. Don't make the audience guess where you're going down this little trail of breadcrumbs you're leaving them. Tell them up front, because guess what? If you don't tell them, what are they going to spend the whole time of the presentation doing? Where's he going? What are we going to do at the end? They're not listening to you. All they're doing is waiting for you to get to the end, and then they start listening. So tell them what the conclusion is. Our sales were up 37%, and here's how we got there. That gets their mind off of what's the big surprise at the end, and it just allows them to follow you on the way. The logic helps build. It helps build people. So here's what we decided. Here's why we made that decision. Here's the new process, and I'm going to tell you all about it. It's about presenting in a logical way, using logic. Sure, we want to do that. We want to make sure it makes business sense, right? We talk about that all the time. That's what a business case does. Most of the time, this is what you'll see. You'll hear an informational presentation that's built around logic. The difference is we want you to think about giving the decision first. Okay? Because if you're doing an informational presentation, you're not asking them to make the decision. If you're asking the audience to make the decision, you're doing motivation. Okay? In this case, we're just sharing information we want you to understand. The second one is chronological. Now, chronological is easy to understand, right? Because we're not connecting dots, we're connecting what? Calendars, time frames. If I'm going to tell you something, a story that goes, and it started like this, what do you expect? Yeah, you expect to say, and this happened next. And then after that, you're going to hear sequential. So, How I Met Your Mother, the television show, the perfect sequential story that does what? Takes us back and forth in. So when you do that purposefully, it can build anticipation. But most of the time you're going to say this starts here and it goes from here and to here to here, because that's the way our brains work. Our brains expect to connect the dots. Our mind wants to, so we started here, we go there, we go there. So chronological is a great method to use if your topic fits it. Depends on what your topic is, what your goal is. The next process we've got is a chain of events. How a series of steps. Okay? Now it's not chronological because what's happening here? Several things are happening at once. So a lot of manufacturing process, a lot of big projects are chain of events presentations. Because if I'm building a car, okay? So the car that you drove in today, when they were manufacturing it, how do you explain that process? Is it chronological? How do they build a car?
Sections.
Yeah, in sections. So you got a transmission plant, you've got an engine plant, you've got a body plant, and then all those pieces come together and that makes a car. And that's a chain of events. If you start and say, this is happening here and this is happening here, when they all come together, your audience can follow you along. It's the business case you are building. We work separately and then we put it all together to make our final product. And then our final informational is to simplify. When you're sitting there and you're deciding, here's my topic, I've got to talk about nuclear energy, and my audience is 5-year-olds. What do you got to do first? You got to dumb it down. You've got to simplify it for your audience. And then what's your goal? To connect something to them. So you want to take your audience from here to here. That's your goal. But you've got to start here. And simplify is a very important one, because a lot of times when we're an expert at something, we present as subject matter experts. I'd like for you to talk about our payroll process. I'd like for you to talk about merchandising. I'd like for you to talk about all of these subjects. You're an expert in it. Your audience is not. How do you connect with them? What does this give you the image of? What are you thinking right now? Over your head. Have you been in that presentation before where you're sitting there? How did you feel during that presentation? Lost?
I was just in that situation the other day where the gentleman was explaining to me the back end calculations of a spreadsheet that had 17 tabs and formulas, and I was so glazed over.
Yeah. Now, are you feeling really smart at this point in this conversation? You felt what?
No, I felt very inadequate.
Inadequate, stupid. Yeah, when you talk over the head or talk down to your audience, those are the two biggest mistakes you can make when you're trying to simplify. Key point number one, do knowledge checks. If you're trying to take someone from here to there, have them teach back to you. Ask questions. Okay, what's the first step? How are we going to do that? So yeah, Stuart, that's great. Thanks for now I've got an idea so we can move on. Do the knowledge check. The second thing is watch your language so you don't use a tone of voice that's like you're talking to little children. Oh, you guys are just not very good at this, but I'll teach you. I'm going to be it's just, you're going to build a barrier between you and your audience, not build the connection, which is what you want to do. So key things. 4 ways we can share information. I want to give you a knowledge check right now. Let's see if we can move on. So Which format would be the best for each one of these topics? Look at your sheet, you got 4 times. You got how cars are manufactured. Which one of those would be best? You might be able to use a couple. Which one do you think fits best for manufacturing a car? Since chain of events, I used it as an example, that's a gimme, okay? How about the history of China? Chronological, because guess what? We think about history, we think of it happened afterwards. How about why a new policy was implemented in the company? Logic, yeah, because here's what we decided to do, and here's why. Now, this kind of gives you the process of elimination for the last one, but the effect of the global economy on shareholder return on investment, what format do you think might work best? If you were qualified to facilitate on that, yeah, you're going to simplify it. You're going to break it down.